before we get into our study, there's just a few things that are going on in the world that I just wanted to talk about. We kind of hit on these topics a little now and again, but every once in a while something new will come out that I just want to look at. So this is something that we've been talking about. This first article is what we've been talking about with Vladimir Putin and in Russia. The bishop, I think he's the Archbishop Grill. He's the leader of the Eastern Orthodox Church. They split away from the Catholic Church around 1000 AD. Don't quote me exactly on that, but it was right around there. There's been a schism between the Eastern and the Western Church, which would be Rome. And so they've been at odds, although they have been talking lately. And it's interesting that this is one of Putin's closest allies. You know, so often we think of Putin as a atheistic person, came out of the Soviet Union, and then, of course, has become the president of Russia for many, many years, and seems like it's a dictatorship. But he has, as an ally, the leader of the Eastern Orthodox Church. And I was mentioning this a while back, and it's interesting, when governments are really in need to control the people, they do it through the church. And we're seeing that today. We're seeing that in the United States of America, where Donald Trump's closest allies are the Christian church. And it's very likely that it's the Christian church that actually got him the victory. And we're seeing the same thing in Russia. And we're talking about a coming together of Russia, and not necessarily going to be close buddies, but they have a working relationship. And it's going to be through the church that the connection is made. And this article brings that concept out just a little bit. And I want to look at this. This is the man himself here. This is the website address. If anyone wants to have a look at that later on, they can have a look at the article. But I want to go through the article because the article's quite interesting, and we can see things developing. What we've been saying for quite some time now, years, is that the conservative Christian movement is going to gain control of the world. They're going to be the ones that are going to enforce the mark of the beast. And that's very clear. We're not going to get into the whys and all the different verses, but this is what we've been teaching. We've got other studies on that. So it's the Christian movement that will take the world by storm, and we're seeing that right now. We've been watching a little bit of what's going on in the church here in North America and elsewhere in the world. And there is a major awakening. And, those people that keep Torah and keep the Sabbath and the feasts and so on, they look at this as a very bad thing. But actually, in Acts chapter 2, it says that God would pour out his Spirit on all flesh. And when I read the words all flesh, I'm thinking that is all-encompassing. That's all over the world. And of course, God, in his infinite wisdom and love, he reaches people where they are. So what people are doing now is they're starting to open their Bibles, and they're starting to see evil in the world as it exists very plainly, in plain sight. And so they're making decisions based on what they're reading in the Word. So this is, I believe, this to be the awakening. This is the Spirit being poured out on all flesh. The issue is there's going to be a division. It's going to be those people that go all the way with God's Word, and those that don't go all the way, and they stick to the status quo, the traditions of the church. And this is the division that we're going to see. But the Word of God has to be open first for people to make these decisions. So what we've seen in the world, I believe, is evil all over, and we don't need to get into all the details, but it's very evident that those people that do not believe in the Bible are trying to take control of the world. This is this push, this New World System push. Call it Agenda 2030. There's a lot of different things going on with that. And so many people think that that is going to be the New World Order and they will force the mark of the beast on people. But this is actually a counterfeit New World Order. That's very interesting. That's not the real deal. The real deal is going to come out of Christianity. And they will take care of the world. The conservative movement will take the world by storm. And we're starting to see this. We were reading this week that the government in Germany is probably going to fall. The government in France is under a tremendous pressure, and also Great Britain. And we're starting to see some changes. People are not liking this the immigration policies and the direction of this system that's being put in place in Europe. And they're starting to recoil from that, and they're starting to pull away from that. And we're starting to see these governments go more of a right wing, if you will, direction. And we're seeing this, of course, in the United States. We're seeing this in Canada as well. We've got a tremendous war going on in the Canadian political arena, and a lot of people calling for Justin Trudeau to resign. So we're seeing this movement more to conservatism, and this is exactly what the prophecies are saying. This rift is in all churches. It's infiltrating all churches. The churches are going to have a right-wing side and a left-wing side. The right-wing side, in most cases, is going to gain control, and that's where we're going. So let's just look at this article, a little preface there on the article, and see what this is saying. The headline in the article was, "Christians should not fear nuclear weapons," says Patriarch Kirill. Now this is an interesting, of course, this article is trying to make him look foolish. And so this is, the headline really does that. So what is this saying here? The head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarch Kirill, often finds himself at the center of controversies. His statements supporting military actions and strong ties with the Russian government fuel widespread public debate. Recently, he addressed the issue of nuclear weapons. Antoine Gurnichenko, former Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. So this now is from the position of somebody that was a former deputy of Ukraine. Released a recording in which Patriarch Kirill once again stirs controversy. In his speech, the cleric stated that Christians should not fear nuclear weapons because, as the faithful, they should not be afraid of the end of the world. This is quite interesting, the way this is all framed here. So now we're talking about the end of the world. Fear-mongering around possible apocalyptic scenarios, excessive alarmism, and speculation on the nuclear issues are not useful from a spiritual point of view. The enemy of humankind is trying to sow anxiety in the hearts of people because it is easier to manipulate a person deprived of the spiritual world. There is no need to play along with this, Patriarch Kirill said. So what he's saying is the atheistic world, those people that are in control right now, they're fear-mongering, talking about nuclear war, trying to scare people. But what he's saying is we need to trust in God. The other group is not trusting in God. So you can see this is starting to really develop in the world. So he says there's no need to play along with this. According to the Patriarch, there is no point in taking risks or tempting fate, as Christians are not afraid of the so-called end of the world. We are waiting for the Lord Jesus, who will come to great glory, destroy evil, and judge all nations. In his view, the faithful need to fear global threats such as do not need to fear global threats such as a potential nuclear war. So he's, again, saying that we need to put our trust in Yeshua. That's pretty obvious from a Christian perspective. This does not mean that we should sit by idly. On the contrary, our earthly mission is to be the Lord's soldiers, to resist evil and to defend high moral ideals. This is the global setting in Russia, said Patriarch Kirill. So this is very interesting. So what he's saying here, and we can see this if we just sort of open our minds, what we can see here is he's really preaching conservatism in Christianity. So these high moral ideals. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, Russia has made some statements. Vladimir Putin has made quite a few statements lately that the problem with the West is they've lost their moral ground, their moral high ground. And there's a bunch of infidels, basically, what he's saying, that are in power. And that's why the United States and the West is suffering, because they've lost their connection with Judeo-Christian values, which is quite interesting because we're told in the Bible, the further away we go from God's plan, the worse it's going to get for us. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. The world is on the brink of nuclear war because of who's in control. And these people are, I would say, not God-fearing people. And this is the result of turning our backs on God. And so what they're saying from the Russian perspective, this is what the problem is. And so they're pushing this narrative that those that they're opposing are godless. And they're the ones that have the high moral values. Moscow Patriarch Kirill, as a prominent leader of the Russian Orthodox Church, is known for his bold statements. He continues his political trajectory by increasingly involving the clergy in actions supporting the regime, so the Russian regime, including mobilizing parishioners to provide military support. So now we're talking about a just war. So they're behind this. So if you can control the conscience of the people, and that's what the church does, that's what the church has always done, control the conscience of the people. If you can convince them that this is a just war and just cause that they're fighting, then this is why people jump in, because they feel it's their God-given obligation to do this. Now, with this kind of an attitude in the church in Russia, you can see clearly why Putin is behind the church in Russia. They are helping him a great deal. His influence reaches far beyond religion, infiltrating social and political structures in Russia. Thanks to close relations with the Kremlin, Kirill maintains a strong position, becoming one of the key allies of President Vladimir Putin. His statements and actions are often perceived as supporting the interests of the Russian government, which regularly subjects him to social criticism. Now, this is at the end of the article. It just throws this in. Much of the information disseminated by Russian media and government representatives may not be accurate. Wow. Fake news? Such reports can be elements of an information war by the Russian Federation. So some of these things, we have to take them with a grain of salt. But these, what we read there, basically is the way it is the Russian church is very much in support of Putin. And so when Putin starts talking about the way the West has lost their moral compass in walking away from Judeo-Christian values, he is speaking with the knowledge that he has. He's actually not that far away when we think of it from President Donald Trump, because Donald Trump, his closest ally is the Christian church as well. And this is going to be what unites these two men, is the value system. Whether they hold it themselves or whether it's for real is almost irrelevant. they're both going to take full advantage of the Christian system in their countries. And of course, with Islam, we know that Islam is against Christianity and Israel. So we can see this whole thing that we've been talking about developing. Now, here's a bit of a meme by this Antoine Garachenko. And it really throws, it's kind of nasty actually, but this is how he approached it. Russian propagandists joke about nuclear weapons. Putin calls Trump and says, now this isn't what he actually did, this is a meme. Putin calls Trump and says, Donald, we've heeded your wish. We give up nuclear weapons. We've decided to give you everything we have. This is good news for you, Trump asks. What's the bad news? In 10 minutes, it's all fly to you. What? Yeah, see how ridiculous that is. But this is, nuclear war is not something to be joked about. But this is how people are. It's just becoming such twisted thinking in all of this. So there's another brief article that I want to look at here. I'm not going to read as much on this article, but there's a point that we need to make here. Saudi Arabia recently, everyone knows about Saudi Arabia is a key player in the Middle East. We've talked about Saudi Arabia as being the fourth king. Daniel 11 verse 3. 2 and 3 tells us that 3 more kings will arise in Persia. 4th will be far richer than them all. Through his strength, he will stir up all against the realm of Grecia or the West or Javan. We've looked at those words, and we can see here that this is actually the West, with the United States leading the way here. So we're looking at a war between the West and Islam. And it will be a world war because Islam now has infiltrated all the countries, all the major countries of the world. And so this is what we're looking at. So right now, everyone's been following what's been going on in Israel with October 7th of last year, the massacre by Hamas. And I believe it was Hamas, not Hezbollah, although Hezbollah is involved in what's going on right now. So we've seen what's been developing. So for years and years and years, as far as I can remember back, because I believe 1948 was when Israel was given its statehood in Israel, and they had drawn up, the UN had drawn up the borders, and this is where Israel was going to have. Now Israel has expanded those borders, and this has really created some ire amongst the Arab nations, and it's been war ever since. And so it's just been a back and forth all the way. So what they've talked about for many years is peace, and we've all heard of peace in the Middle East. And the only reasonable conclusion is that there will be no peace in the Middle East. Most people don't understand that this war has been waged for 4,000 years. Actually 6,000. It's God's people against Satan's agencies. But really it started, the major one here started with Abraham, Ishmael, and Isaac. So Ishmael, the Muslims claim that he's the father of the Arab nations. Islam, that Abraham was actually the father of the Islamic religion. And they come through the descendants of Ishmael. And it was interesting that it was Ishmaelite traders that sold Joseph into being a slave in Egypt. And that being sold into Egypt as a slave was a fate worse than death. So these people, the hatred for each other goes way, way back. You can't tell me that the Ishmaelites did not know who Joseph was back then. They would have absolutely known who Joseph was. So this war between Isaac and Ishmael has been going on for a long, long time. So they believe that the Dome of the Rock should be a possession of the Arab state, and the Palestinian state, and it should be, East Jerusalem should be the capital of the Palestinian state. The problem with that is that's where the Temple Mount is in East Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem. And so that's why we can't have peace, because the Israelite people are not going to give up the Temple Mount. So it's an impossibility to have peace in the Middle East. And so what this is talking about here now, we've had this interruption with Trump because Donald Trump and bin Salman were getting along pretty well until the Biden regime got power, and then everything has gone sideways since then. So now there's renewed talks. There's talk about what's going to happen after this. So this is kind of what this article was about, but I just want to draw your attention to one paragraph here. According to 6 Reuters sources, a full-fledged U.S.-Saudi agreement must be approved by the U.S. Senate with a 2/3 majority. But this will not happen unless Riyadh recognizes Israel. In September, bin Salman stated that diplomatic relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia could only, this is the condition, only be established after the creation of an independent Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem. So Jerusalem as a whole, including East Jerusalem, cannot be the capital of Israel. They've got to divide it with East Jerusalem in the Palestinian area. Why is this important? Because that's where the Dome of the Rock is, and there's a little mosque up on there, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and these two areas are considered the third most holy site in all of Islam, including Mecca and Medina being the first two, and then this one being the third. So they are not going to give this up. So what we've been looking at in the prophecies seem to indicate that Israel will have a temple in Jerusalem before the time of the end. And of course, the only way you're going to do that is to defeat the Islamic forces that want to have that. So we can see all of this stuff is all developing and in the news continually. And we're watching this develop. Now here's something else that just happened, I believe it was about a week ago. This question, this is taken from the Gateway Pundit. Great news outlet. If you're not aware of it and you like to follow what's going on in the news, Gateway Pundit, highly recommend that one. It's a conservative news outlet, so you're actually getting things that you're not going to see on your cable networks. Great way to get the other side of the story. Okay, so what the headline is, did Russia and China sever NATO cables to block an attack and delay World War III? Very interesting headline. So this cable that was broken, this internet cable in the Baltic Sea last week that was broken, they've been trying to figure out who did it. Did Russia do it? What was going on? Well, this cable was a very important cable. It connected NATO, actually, to the Scandinavian countries through the Baltic Sea. And it's believed possibly that China actually did it. And that's very interesting as well, and we'll get into that in a second here. So this cable interrupts the internet in between these countries, which really hinders NATO in what they're trying to do. And so it's believed that they did this on purpose to slow NATO down, because NATO seems to be in a race to get World War III happening. Now, there's some interesting concepts, and I just want to cover this for a little bit, because I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but in Ukraine, they put off presidential elections because of the war in Ukraine. So Zelensky basically took control and said, we're not going to have elections because of this. The other addition to that is that if we're in the midst of a war, then we don't change governments. So it's almost like these world powers are trying to escalate this thing in Europe so that the governments don't change. You see, they fear the worst possible thing for them is to get in a conservative-styled government because that would be their demise, and literally their demise. And we know that here in the United States and Canada. A lot of the things that they've been doing for years they're going to be exposed for what they've done. And I don't doubt for a moment that we're going to see people charged of treason, and it's going to be major what actually is going to happen. So these people are fighting for their lives, literally fighting for their lives, and it looks like they're all aboard to escalate this war, and they believe, it seems, that they will be preserved through it. Part of the article tells us the severing of these cables appears to be more than a mere act of sabotage. It may well represent a brilliant and calculated geopolitical move designed to delay NATO's escalation until President Donald J. Trump, known for his aversion to endless wars and commitment to diplomacy, is sworn in as the 47th President of the United States on January 20, 2025. So let's try and make some sense out of this. I don't believe that President Putin loves to have his people slaughtered in the Eastern Europe. And he's actually a man of reason. If anyone's listened to him a little bit, he's not somebody that just wants to slaughter people. So is it possible that China, it looks like China was involved in this, to disrupt NATO's plan to escalate this war? I don't believe either China or Russia is looking for a world war. And they might want to have more control. China may want to have more control, but it's going to support its ally in Russia to slow this thing down. It looks very possible that is what's going on here. And we can see here that the bad guys in China and Russia through this article may not be as bad as they're being portrayed, and the real bad guys could possibly be the guys that are involved in NATO. Now, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. That doesn't mean that I'm supporting China and Russia. It just means the bad guy might be NATO. The people that are in control of NATO may be the worst on the block. The leaders of NATO, those that are in charge, are trying to preserve their own lives, basically. And this is why they're trying to start that World War III, so that possibly even Donald Trump wouldn't get into power if we're in the midst of a World War III. So it's all corrupt. It's completely all corrupt here with NATO, and we've seen that through the years.